nobody in those public schools were saying, what can I do to be saved?
Right.
They were all saying, why won't you use my pronouns?
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
my children needed an answer to that, an answer that was
Yes.
grounded in scripture, but then evidenced by the world that God has made and the sociological harms that go from confusing and blurring the line between male and female. And you know what's interesting? Some of those people ended up at my church.
Hey, friends, I've got a great conversation for you today with Katy Faust. Katy is an absolute beast, and I mean that in the best way possible. She is bold and courageous. She is literally changing the world by advocating for people who can't advocate or speak for themselves. And I'm talking about our children. We've had her on the show before to talk about her book, Them Before Us, Why We Need a Global Children's Rights Movement. And she has actually accomplished that global children's rights movement today with the Greater Than campaign, which we're going to talk about today, a campaign that I am incredibly honored to endorse and be a part of and help promote. So I remember way back before the decision was made to legalize gay marriage, and people were saying things on social media like, it's not going to affect your life. It's not going to change anything. No one's going to be hurt by this. But all these years later, we see that there is a rise in IVF and surrogacy. There is a rise, sadly, in abortion. And what Katy argues is that when we changed the definition of marriage from something that was biblical to something that really centered just the emotional needs of adults, everything changed. And when the emotional needs of adults is centered and is viewed as primary, children always suffer. And that's where we are today. So I want to invite my audience to really consider being a part of the Greater Than campaign. It's a campaign to end gay marriage. And this is what really is the best for the children. And I hope you'll understand more about that as we get into this conversation with Katy Faust. Katy, great to have you back on the show. For anybody who's unfamiliar with you, we're going to be talking about your Greater Than campaign, which I'm very excited about. I think it's about time and it's very important. But I want to put some flesh on it for people. This is not something you're speaking to in a vacuum. This is part of your story. Can you share just a little thumbnail sketch of your story and what led you to the type of activism you do today? And then we'll get into the campaign.
Well, everybody thinks I'm in this because my parents divorced. And then right after that, my mom repartnered with a woman. And so, if you Google Katy Faust, some of the old articles and interviews will say, women with two moms campaigns against, gay marriage. But I didn't have two moms. Nobody has two moms. My mother has been with her partner for 40 years, and I'm close to them, and I love them, and I see them regularly. So this isn't some kind of like retribution campaign. It's really like, what did I learn from my childhood? Mothers and fathers matter. And, my mother and her stable, kind partner could never replace my father. Didn't try. Same thing. My father's new girlfriends or wife could never replace my mother. Thankfully, didn't try. But what did I learn from that? You can and should bear the emotional burdens of your gay and lesbian friends and stand firmly on the reality that children need their mother and father. And there's no conflict. There's no compromise. You don't need to bend for those two things to be true. The world says you can't do both. The Bible says you must do both. And justice for children insists that you not move 1 inch when it comes to matters of marriage and family. But what really got me into this, honestly, was I was a sideliner for a really long time because I was a pastor's wife. I was a stay-at-home mom, very busy with little kids, really happy to just serve in my community and not necessarily be an online detractor. But when President Obama evolved on the topic of gay marriage in 2012, I heard two things: a sea change in the media saying the only possible reason you could be against gay marriage is if you hated your gay family and friends, or it was motivated by animus or phobia. And I was like, that's just ridiculous. I know plenty of people that support traditional marriage who are sacrificing and loving and tending for their gay brother as he's dying with AIDS.
Right,
I knew
sure.
those. But also, the main thing that did it was they're like, marriage has nothing to do with children, but also it has everything to do with children, and kids with two mothers or two fathers are doing just as well and even better than some kids with mothers and fathers. And that's where I said, you've crossed the line for me. Because when you're looking at a child with two mothers, you're looking at a child who has lost their father. And when you're looking at a child with two fathers, you're looking at a child who has lost their mother. And my husband and I at that point had been working with kids for 20 years. junior high ministry, high school ministry, college ministry. I had been the assistant director at the largest Chinese adoption agency in the world. I was a mother with kids, and their kids were at my house. I just stopped running the youth ministry at our church like 2 years ago. Like, I just have lots and lots of close contact with kids. And I will tell you the thing kids care about, whether their mother or father has left them. They care about that. In fact, it's one of the ways that we can wound children the deepest and for the longest is when we starve them of their mother or father. Not, especially when it's not tragedy based, especially when it's very clear that the adult chose to leave them. And that is painful. So to me, I got into this because I felt like nobody was speaking up on behalf of the children, and their actual rights, longings, and needs were being distorted to advance a narrative that would permanently deprive them of their mom or dad. So I got into this kind of just as an anonymous blogger in 2012, 13, 14, kind of started writing and speaking under my own name, started Them Before Us in 2018, because children need defense. They need formal defense in the culture and in the courtrooms. And they don't just need it on the topic of marriage. Everything that has to do with marriage and family, whether it's divorce, reproductive technologies, thruples, you know,
Mm-hmm.
consensual non-monogamy, or however the New York Times wants to, promote that new alternative lifestyle. Every area where we talk about marriage and family always obsessively focuses on the desires and needs and identities of adults. And children are stuck with the short end of the stick 100% of the time, to the detriment of their development, their identity, and their safety. So Before Us, we try to advance the rights of children. We try to represent them in the public square. We seek to change public opinion so that we all see them as the victim when we get these questions wrong, not adults who don't get what they want.
And, you would think that the conservative movement would get this, but does it feel like it's kind of gone backwards? I'm just thinking about, you did this amazing, honestly, it's like my favorite episode of the Jordan Peterson podcast ever is the one that you were on, because like I've never truly, Katy, seen somebody school him like you schooled him. It was like, how is he not thinking this through? And ultimately, just as a little synopsis in case anyone hasn't seen it, although everybody needs to go listen to it because it was just brilliant, because the two of you are friends and that's very evident. There was no animosity, but Jordan is kind of coming from this place of understanding rightly the tragedy that has been happening to so many minors with the push toward gender reassignment surgery and puberty blockers and all of that stuff. But it seems like when it comes to things like gay marriage, or maybe, for example, two gay dads that might adopt a child, he's not there. And it doesn't make a lot of sense, because if you're going to be really consistent, you would go there. But it seems like a lot of people in the conservative movement aren't there. Why do you think that is? Are they getting there, or are they moving away from it? What do you think's going on?
Okay. So the same thing is happening with the conservative movement as is happening to Jordan Peterson, as is happening to all of us. And that is that the victim determines the policy. Okay. And this is something that we say at Them Before Us all the time, is whoever you determine to be the victim, the policy is going to wrap around them. So for a long time, we have said adults who do not get what they want are victims. And that
Right.
was the main way that they drove forth not just legal change, but social change in relation to the definition of marriage and parenthood. Adults who identified as gay, if they could not have their relationship legally validated by the law, they were victims. And so the whole game is victim identification and defense. So we totally misfired when it came to especially marriage as conservatives. We said, oh no, if gay marriage happens, then it's Christian adults who are the victims, right? They'll have to bake cakes they don't want to bake. They're going to have to arrange flowers. They'll have to sign marriage licenses they don't want to sign. It is true that religious liberty is in conflict with gay marriage, but Christian adults are not the primary victims. Children are the victims. And when you start thinking about the victimization of children as it relates to marriage and family, suddenly everything is crystal clear. And it's just not something that, on the topic of specifically surrogacy and gay marriage, that Jordan Peterson had, I don't think he had paid as much attention to that as I had. And you can hear it in the conversation he had with his very good friend, Dave Rubin, who is gay married with two surrogate born children. And in that conversation, you can see Dave Rubin framing himself as the victim.
Mm.
Oh, I needed this to be fulfilled. I realized I wasn't going to be able to be mature. Well, I realized that if we're married, then obviously we want children just like everybody else. Everybody wants babies. And we chose not to do adoption because there's really something special about having your own children and the empathy of like, of course there's something, Jordan Peterson is like, yes, there's something special about having your own children. It's amazing to look at your children and see yourself or see your partner or your spouse in them. Like, it's wonderful. Flip it on its head, people. Flip it on its head. And that's what I said to Jordan Peterson about Dave Rubin. Like, children do not exist to mature you. They don't exist to validate you. They don't exist to fulfill you. Children exist and you have duties to them. It's not them that conforms to you. It's you who conforms to them. We love looking at our children and saying, oh my gosh, what a resemblance. Oh, I can see myself in her. Children love that too. They love to look at their parents and say, I get this from my dad. I am just like my mom. And I can say that as an adoptive mother who has a child who doesn't get to see himself reflected in his father or his mother, and the sadness and disconnect that brings to him, and that he has to construct an identity in ways that are outside of the ways our other children construct their identity. So it's just a matter of flipping the script and looking at it from the child's perspective. Typically, you just have to say it once and people get it.
Yeah.
I do think that things are changing among Christians and conservatives and pro-lifers. Stop looking at it from the perspective of adults. Understand that children are victimized when they lose their mother or father because adult desire is prioritized above their rights. And I will tell you, the picture becomes very clear very fast.
This is so good. And I'm so glad you started this greater than campaign, because it seems to me like there politically have been some good things happen from a conservative standpoint. But on the issue of abortion, IVF, gay marriage, it seems like conservatives just aren't making these connections and aren't really all that concerned with those topics anymore. They're just focused on other things. So it's really time for this conversation to be brought back into the center. So I remember in 2015, everybody was talking about the Supreme Court decision. And I just remember so many people on Facebook saying things like, hey, if gay marriage is legalized, it's not going to affect your life at all. Just get out of the way. It has nothing to do with you. It's not going to affect anyone other than the people who are getting married. And again, framing that with the victims being the people who can't get married, versus I don't think a lot of people were thinking about the real victims ultimately who would become the children. So maybe talk a bit about why you have chosen to kind of put forth this campaign to get this conversation back into the center, which I'm so grateful and so glad that you are doing, because not just from a righteousness and biblical perspective, but as an advocacy for children perspective, like this is the conversation we need to be having. As America turns 250 this year, I want to help Good Ranchers honor the people that helped build it, and that is American ranchers. And so much to love about Good Ranchers. I love that every cut of meat is born, raised, and harvested right here in the United States, and their customer service is based here in the United States. So when you subscribe to a Good Ranchers box, it's super easy to skip or cancel by just going on the website. I would never cancel, though, because I love my grass-fed beef, my better than organic chicken, my heritage breed pork that shows up at my door every single month. In fact, just yesterday, I was kind of tired. It had been a long day, so I just decided to do something really simple. I grabbed some Good Rancher steaks out of the freezer. I thawed them out. I grilled them up with some potatoes and some salad. Super easy meal, but it gathered my family around the table and didn't take a lot of mental effort or energy. If you want to try Good Ranchers today, you can get that better than organic chicken, grass-fed beef delivered to your door by going to goodranchers.com and using my code Alisa. If you do that, you can select an extra add-on for the life of your subscription, plus get $25 off your first order. So try it today. Go to goodranchers.com, use my code Alisa, American meat delivered.
Yeah. Why are we doing this? Because children have been victimized. And when they said, this has nothing to do with you, it's not going to impact you, A, yes, it does. And I'm going to explain why in a second. But B, it affects the most vulnerable. And the truth is, we should have known this. 16 countries legalized gay marriage before we did, and they all had something in common. They simultaneously stripped or weakened children's rights to their own mother and father, because those two things always go together. You cannot say children need a mom and dad, and I support gay marriage. One of those is going to win. You simply cannot have both. And the illustration is exactly what happened in our country, which is in 2015 when we had legal gay marriage forced upon us by 5 Supreme Court justices. What did they say? They said, there can be no distinction between same-sex and opposite-sex couples. Same-sex couples need to be afforded the same constellation of benefits as heterosexual couples do. Well, marriage law is tethered to parenthood law. In essence, marriage law functions as the sun at the center of a solar system that is connected to all the different ways we think about marriage and parenthood, whether it's birth certificates, the definition of parenthood, different tax credits that connect to marriage as an institution, understandings of infertility, custody arrangements. I mean, everything centers around the definition of marriage. And so when you swap out that procreative heterosexual couple and you swap in a definition that really exalts adult validation and identity, well, parenthood is going to accommodate. It must accommodate. And if it doesn't, it's now discriminatory. So what have we seen over the last 10 years? In essence, we have seen an erasure of all of the natural contours of the family in law. So we no longer say mother and father. We say parent one, parent two, or we say guardian. We no longer say that biology is the way that you create a family. And if not, adoption is critical to graft the child into your home under a system of very specific scrutiny, background checks, and screening. We no longer solely identify infertility as a medical problem affecting heterosexuals. Now, all of those are discriminatory because they treat same-sex couples differently. So what we've done is we have said mother and father don't exist. Biology is irrelevant. You can be socially infertile so that a single or a same-sex couple can have IVF subsidized services through their insurance company or state programs. So right now in the Obergefell universe, the only contour of a family, the only thing that makes a family is, did the adult get the exact baby they specified in the way that they wanted it? The child can go home to 1, 2, 3 more adults. One adult can mass produce a variety of different children. The gender of the parents are irrelevant. And by the way, when this happens through reproductive technologies, there's no background checks or screening. We've rewritten parenthood laws to say if you have a valid contract, you can go home with an unrelated baby with the full force of the US government behind you, even if you're a foreign national, even if you're a convicted pedophile, even if you're a single parent or a quadruple parent, it does not matter. The problem is all of those natural contours of the family matter to children. We have erased all of the different criteria as it relates to what makes a family that lead to child thriving, child development, identity formation, and most specifically, safety. All of those different natural contours that God embedded in the family serve very critical roles as it relates to the well-being of the child. But we erased them in the name of adult equality. And we've been doing it for 10 years. So the Greater Than campaign seeks to reverse that. We are here to say, adults do not get marriage as some form of national therapy because you suffered as a kid or you want validation or something. Marriage is for children. Marriage is an institution that when it unites children to the two people to whom they have a natural right, they're most likely to be safe in love, invested, connected to. Their development is maximized. Their identity is secured. And it leads to the pathway where they are most likely to thrive as adults. So it's just a bunch of conservatives and Christians saying, you cannot have this institution. We're taking it back on behalf of kids.
How has the response been since you've launched the campaign? I mean, I know the minute I heard about it, I texted you and said, you got to come on and talk about this because this is so important. Have you met with some resistance in the conservative movement? I mean, of course, you're being resisted by the progressives, but what has the response been like?
So it's really interesting. Since we launched, there hasn't been any resistance from conservatives or Christians. Not that I don't think that it's coming. We anticipate that there will be some in the conservative, or at least the right side of the political aisle, who will say, hey, ahead of the midterms, you're splitting the party. So we are going to work on getting some polling because I tell you what, there is a split. But the majority of people on the right are going to say, children need their mother and father. Of course they do. And we will say to them, there's a split and you're on the wrong side. So it looks like you need to shut up, not us. But on the outset, when I was forming this coalition and reaching out to a variety of different partners, major partners, half of which are on our website, which is incredible, half of which feel like for different conflict of interest reasons, they may not be able to put their name publicly, but are working with us behind the scenes. I thought it was going to be pulling teeth. I thought that I was going to have to cajole and convince and beg. Hey, get in on this. I think that it's time. We really have an opportunity to do something. We have a great judicial strategy. We won't embarrass you. We're going to this is going to be high level quality, everything from the strategy to the messaging, to the presentation, to the comms. We are serious about this. And there were two that said, you're going to go down in flames. I don't want anything to do with this. And there was about 200 that said,
Wow.
yes, let's
Wow.
go. Many dozens said, I love what you're doing. I can't officially be part of the coalition, but tell me whatever you need me to do. I can retweet. I can have you on my podcast, whatever. But close to 100 said, I am all in. So since then, I think we had a great launch week. That first week alone, our trailer video had probably 5 million impressions. And I think that two things that I would say are a triumph. Number one, there was great weeping and gnashing of teeth on behalf of all of the usual suspects, GLAAD and the Human Rights Campaign and a variety of different progressive outlets and LGBTQ organizations denounced us. MSNBC had the head of Human Rights Campaign on to talk about how terrible we were. Martina Navratilova and I went back and forth on X a few times, and I think she called me vile 4 times. I mean,
Wow.
it's all kind of the same thing. But what I loved is, even though there was massive publicity from the left, condemning us and calling us obviously Christian nationalists, blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
Nobody in the coalition flinched.
Good.
Nobody said, I want out. Oh, can you take this down? I don't want my name on the website anymore. I feel like Christianity grew a spine, and we're no longer susceptible to the same kind of emotionally manipulative tactics that we were 10 years ago. The other thing is, we've probably had 24 organizations say, I want in on this publicly. So our website is always expanding in terms of the About Us page. With God's help, want 100 of them by the 11th anniversary of Obergefell in June. And we're just going to continue to eat up more and more and more of the real estate as it relates to how everybody talks about marriage. And how do we need to do that? By making the direct connection, the quick, direct, concise, compelling argument that gay marriage victimizes children, because it does. And natural marriage, as God designed it, is plan A for child protection. And you simply can't have both. You can either protect kids or you can support gay marriage. And we're going to make that very, very clear, not just to Christians, but to the whole nation.
Well, I praise God for that. And just one of the ways that I think that I've seen that gay marriage has victimized children is in this whole world of IVF, and just it seems to be, and you can speak to this because you would know more about, boots on the ground, what this actually looks like. But it just seems like that industry has just exploded, because obviously if you have 2 men or 2 women and they can't procreate on their own, they're going to need to be going outside of that to try to make that happen. Lots of times that happens through IVF and paying a woman to be a surrogate and all sorts of things like that. But you see so much online, and right now it's so hard to know what is real and what is true because of AI and all of the trickery that goes on. But I see these posts about designer babies and how people are selecting for sex, and they're discarding embryos that might have propensity for disease or something in the future, which is, heading toward eugenics if it's not already there. Are we there? Are we doing eugenics in this country now? Speak to that. If you're looking for some amazing theology and apologetics training for your 13 to 22-year-old, look no further than Summit Ministries, who have been doing that great work for over 60 years. They have summer programs, kind of like summer camps, where students go to Manitou Springs, Colorado, or Anderson, South Carolina, and learn about the historic Christian worldview. They make a lot of friends. They have fun. I get to go there as one of the faculty and talk to the students about deconstruction and progressive conservative Christianity. There are other great speakers like our friend Christopher Yuan and Kathy Cook. And so when the students go to these programs, they're going to discuss hard topics like abortion, gender identity, how we can trust the Bible, and even age-old questions like, if God is good, why is there evil? Because it's not just about getting apologetics answers. Summit wants your student to learn how to live winsomely and bravely in today's world. But here's the thing, their summer sessions are almost full. And so you need to take advantage of this today by going to summit.org/Alisa26. If you register before March 31st, you're going to get the early bird pricing, and that's $250 off. But if you use the code Alisa26, you're going to get another $250 off for a total savings of $500 off. So don't wait. Go today to summit.org/Alisa26 and use that code Alisa26.
Yes, we're doing eugenics in this country. There are some things that have not yet happened. Like there's been a few rounds of sort of artificial wombs, sort of ectopic matrix-like videos. That is not real yet. They are working on it. What is real is being able to screen your embryos for up to 1,200 different traits so that you can eliminate the ones that do not have the traits that you want. You know, we think about IVF as this is a way to help infertile couples have children. Yeah, that sometimes happens. But those same infertile couples are going to be at clinics where 75% of them offer sex selection. Almost all of them are going to virtually force you to do pre-implantation screening so you can discard the embryos that are maybe have some kind of genetic abnormality or perceived genetic abnormality, because a lot of time the tests are wrong. All of them are going to grade your embryos. They're going to rank them A, B, C, or D. They're going to encourage you to keep or implant the A embryos and freeze or discard the subpar embryos. And so, you know, you've already have clinics even before the total genome screening was available that could test babies' embryos for things like eye color. And, you know, they're not saying we're going to make a baby that has, we're not going to make a little girl with this specific shade of azul blue eyes. We're going to make 20 babies and we're going to test all of them. And we're going to reject the ones that are not little girls with this specific color of azul blue eyes. So that is eugenics. That's exactly what it is, right? You're deciding what is fit, and who is not. The fit ones survive. The unfit are discarded and destroyed. And how are they destroyed? They're either left in freezers forever, they're thawed or discarded, or they're donated to research. And so that is what's happening in the world of IVF. Big fertility gets so much traction off of us thinking, well, this is how my sister who really wants to have babies is going to be able to have a baby. But even those of us in the conservative Christian pro-life world very rarely are going to engage with IVF in a way where no child loses their right to life and no child loses their right to their mother and father. But you're right. If adults are going to be truly equal in the eyes of the law and in the eyes of the culture as it relates to marriage and family, then technology and the law have to accomplish what biology prohibits, which is making two adults of the same sex parents of a child. So that means reorienting all of parenthood law away from the natural contours of the family, a biological connection, male and female, a procreative relationship. And it has to be reordered around the specific designs of the adult. And then the technology has to exist to extract sperm, egg, and rent womb so that you can acquire other people's children. That's what it is. If you are a same-sex couple and you want a child, you are now saying, in essence, you have a right to other people's offspring. So, of course, in the middle of all of this, it is children who pay the price. That's what happens when culture, law, and technology gets family wrong. Children are the victims.
You know, I was really disappointed at the State of the Union address, and I've seen, you know, Trump talk about this in other places about his kind of push toward IVF and to make it cheaper and more available for people. Where do you think we're at with that? What's your hope as far as influencing even within the conservative movement to get people to kind of wake up? Because I get on one hand, like they're not thinking it all the way through. They're thinking, oh, we want to make sure that we can increase our birth rate or whatever it might be, or give, again, the adult victim couples the right to do these things. But do you have hope that you'll be able to make some changes even within the conservative movement that just seems to be running full steam ahead on the IVF train?
I think we are making changes, but there's such a long on ramp here because we've got decades of people thinking this is just about helping my infertile sister have a baby. And everybody wants their infertile sister to have a baby because she would be a wonderful mother and she longs for it. And so it's a misidentification of the victims. Because big fertility absolutely obscures the victimization of children. We don't have any reporting requirements. We don't know how many little lives are made every year. We don't know what happens to them. We don't know how many of them go home with unrelated adults. We don't know how many of them are destroyed and discarded. Like, and we have tried at them before us to recommend policy where we just ask fertility clinics in a certain state, just tell us how many lives you're making and what happens to them. And of course, there is violent rejection of that. Because I think if anybody knew, it's a lot like the abortion industry. If you knew what was taking place, there would be an outcry. So right now, the fertility world, and I think President Trump too, has this understanding that this is just about heterosexual couples getting to have the babies that they long to have. That does happen. But the reality is, if you believe children have a right to life from the moment of fertilization, by some numbers, the baby making industry destroys 4 times the number of little lives as the baby taking industry of abortion. So this is an issue where you have to recenter the victim. It is not women that desperately want a baby,
Mm.
even though we need to empathize with them and bear their burden. It is children who are discarded, destroyed, and eugenically selected out of existence who are the victims here. I don't think that President Trump is a convictional social conservative. I think that he is a guy who understands 80-20 issues. And the truth is that there's an 80%, around 80% approval for IVF, and he understands that's winning. That's a winning issue for him.
Mm.
However, I think there's people in his administration that understand that it's actually not just about increasing the birth rate, which IVF doesn't, by the way. It's
Mm.
not just about helping infertile couples have babies. They understand that it is the commodification of children
Yeah.
that threatens not just their right to life and their right to their mother and father, but their right to be born free and not bought and sold. There's a lot of people in the administration who are pretty wise to the issue. I think that's probably why after his executive order last February saying he was going to make IVF, cheap and free or available, more available, there wasn't any presidential action until much longer than the 90-day deadline. I think it's because there was a lot of internal discussion within the administration. Will they continue to push something? I don't know, but it is a challenge. It's actually like a call for those of us who understand that this is an urgent matter when it comes to child defense to start to speak up, get educated, and spread the word.
Mhm.
Very real lives are at stake here. And IVF is an area where we need to get this right.
Yeah, and that's what I've seen since the decision in 2015 is it's just been like a bursting of the commodification of children. And I that's why I so appreciate what you're doing. Let's talk through your strategies. You've got like this three-pronged approach for how you're going to be going about things. And it says first, you're going to try and reestablish the preeminence of the parent-child relationship through policy reform and strategic court cases. Can you expand on that a bit?
Yeah. So, in general, what we want to do is all we need to do. So, what gay marriage has done is it has removed all the contours of the natural family, right? They've stripped mothers and fathers. They said anybody can be on a child's birth certificate, biological, unrelated, whatever, as long as you have a contract, you're the parent. They have absolutely prohibited states from making a distinction between same sex and opposite sex couples. But as it relates to children, there's really big distinctions between those two. So our policy recommendations for different state level lawmakers who want to participate in this is simply allow those distinctions to reemerge within law. Say things like unrelated adults cannot go on birth certificates. That is a document that exists to serve the child. It's not a second marriage license. Children have a right to know their biological parentage. So even if you're married to the child's biological mother, no, you can't go on the birth certificate. Things like prohibiting sperm and egg purchasing. You cannot buy and sell gametes. Those are children. They will lead to children who will long to know their mother or father. Things like having a child tax credit for biological parents who are raising their child, married to the child's other biological parent. So what we've done is we've just reinforced the natural realities of the child how they come to be and what they need as they grow, which is a connection with their own mother and father. We're just simply saying in law, let's have the law reflect these child-centric realities. But notice that each of those makes exclusions. It means that same-sex couples, and the truth is some heterosexual couples too, are not going to be able to participate in these laws that are specifically advanced to recognize and connect the child to their own mother and father. And so there will be an objection from same-sex couples, maybe an objection from some step families saying, well, wait a second, we can't both be biologically related. So this is discriminatory. And we will say, yes, two men are different than a mother and a father. You might have the same emotional strength and emotional commitment, but as it relates to the child, your relationship is different. So then when that is challenged, because it will be, the question before the court is not going to be, do the gay men have dignity? The answer is, of course they do. The answer is not going to be, how do they sexually identify? That's not even part of the equation. We're just talking about the question before the court is then going to be, do children benefit from their own mother and father, or is a state-assigned stranger just as good? So we're changing the entire question. Like I tell people, it's not that we just stopped playing their game. We're going to play a whole nother sport, right? We're actually playing on a whole nother field over here. And you can't bring your like corner kicks and your throw-ins over here because we're playing baseball. Literally, those moves are not going to be able to have any impact. And that was really the only move they had. The only move they had was, you're erasing my existence. You think I'm a second-class
Right.
citizen. Are you telling me that I shouldn't exist? And the answer is like, I don't care. Those actually are not relevant at all to the question of what is the value of a child being known and loved by their mother and father. So it's just a judicial strategy that centers the child and reinforces the natural parent-child relationship, of which we actually have centuries of common law behind it.
If you've listened to this podcast for any amount of time, you know how important it is to me to stand up for the unborn. And this is why I am so honored to partner with an amazing ministry called Alliance Family Services. Their vision is to compete directly with Planned Parenthood. In fact, they would love to put Planned Parenthood out of business. And they do this by operating a nationwide network of reproductive healthcare clinics that are medically exceptional and unapologetically Christian. In fact, every person who comes through their doors gets the gospel of Jesus Christ. And they believe that Christians should have the corner on reproductive health care. And so they provide all sorts of things that Planned Parenthood, by the way, doesn't provide. But one of my favorite things they do is 24/7 abortion reversal. A lot of people are unaware that you can actually reverse the abortion if you've only taken the first pill before you take the second one the next day. And there are pro-life centers across the country that provide this service, but I love that Alliance Family Services does it 24/7. Their goal is to have 30 clinics by 2030. We want to see the end of child sacrifice in our nation, and by operating God-honoring reproductive healthcare clinics to save as many lives as possible while advocating for laws that will protect the preborn, I think this can happen in our lifetime. But Alliance Family Services needs your help. You can go to alliancefamilyservices.org/Alisa to make a donation today, or better yet, donate monthly. Again, that's alliancefamilyservices.org/Alisa. So, as I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking, how can we do this in an emotionally compelling way? Just especially that first strategy of just trying to help people understand what's really going on. Because you just framed it so beautifully. I've had in Q&As, I've had people stand up and say, and maybe we weren't even talking about gay marriage, but just homosexuality in general. I had a student stand up in a Q&A and say, why are you trying to deny the existence of gay people? And it was just like such a confusing question, because I'm thinking nobody's denying your humanity or your existence, but that is how it is perceived. So we have to change the narrative in a certain way. And I think too, that leads into your second strategy, which is that you have to change public opinion. I mean, that is key, right? And you note here that it's not going to happen until you change the victim. And I think this is where people who have podcasts and platforms and people who are storytellers and artists can really come in and help help people to put flesh on this in a way that they can understand it. Because when it's just in the abstract, it can feel distant, it can feel cold, it can feel like you're being judgmental and mean and all of these things. But when we can really, like you said, center the real victims and tell stories, I think this has been partially successful in the abortion conversation when you actually put flesh on it. When people hear the stories of people who survived abortion and then they go testify before Congress of their story, that is the kind of thing that can be emotionally compelling. Can you talk about that second strategy of changing public opinion? I feel like that's doable.
It is doable. I We're totally going to win this. Like, we are going to win this. And it is because you have to have a specific victim. Christians, conservatives, pro marriage fighters have always had natural law. They've always had the social science. They've always had common sense and observable reality. We've even had the 5 major religions of the world that disagree about nothing except marriage on our side. And it hasn't been enough because they chose the victim. We never took the victim back and properly centered the victim. And then they humanized their victim by giving them long, complex, emotionally engaging backstories. We never did that, right? And so, as much as I hate the expression lived experience, unfortunately, that's kind of the dominating authority in our culture right now. So, our answer is, oh, you want lived experience? I'll give you some lived experience. I'm going to give you the experience of children who were starved of their mother or father and then desperately longed to be loved by a man and got into some pretty terrible situations because the person who is statistically the most connected to, invested in, and protective of them, their own father, was purchased out of their life. And then they started to make really bad decisions with guys and ended up being a teen mother. Okay, so that's the lived experience I'm going to give you. Or the girl with 2 dads who said, I desperately wanted a mother, and all the rest of my life, I just spent my childhood asking female teachers or my aunts, will you be my mom? Will you be my mom? Because even though I was really well loved by 2 men, I desperately wanted a mother, like every human child. So it is very, very important that we tell the flesh and blood stories of people that have been affected. That is why we saw such a drastic turnaround in the transgender movement. I'm not
Yeah.
saying that it's dead, but it was not enough to say the very obvious, self-evident reality that men and women are different and a man can't become a woman. We had to see the girls with their breasts cut off. We had to see the podiums be replaced in female sports by men taking 1, 2, and 3. Like the cycling competitions are just ridiculous. There's no champion female cyclers anymore. So you have to be able to see the Riley Gaines and tell the stories. You have to see her standing next to this giant woman who displaced her on the podium. That's not something that we have ever done in relation to the marriage debate. And like I said, when we did, we chose the wrong victim. I am very empathetic for the religious adults, the Christian adults who have been punished for their convictions. They
Sure.
are not the primary victims. It is children who are growing up motherless and fatherless, children that are being mass produced, children that are being carted away by predators and disappearing across borders, children who are being well loved by 2 dads who walk by women when they're downtown looking at every face going, I wonder if that's my mother.
Yeah.
Is that my mother? Is she my mother? I wonder if I've met her. Does she know I exist? Those are the kind of things that children who have been separated from their mother or father, especially through reproductive technologies, think about. And we need to tell their stories. It is so important. So that is what we are working on, our working group that is composed of some pretty stalwart, brave, clear influencers, Lila Rose and Michael Knowles and Josh Hammer and Ali Stuckey and Delano Squires and Heidi St. John and Steve Dace. I mean, we just have people that have never wavered on this, who are
Yeah.
committed to, in essence, beginning with educating the right on why this is actually a matter of child protection. And that needs to be the dominant way that we talk about it.
Yeah, it's so important because there's so many battling narratives out there. You mentioned Ali Stuckey. I just listened to her podcast the other day. She did such a phenomenal, beautiful job talking about the Olympian, Alisa Liu, I think is her name, who was conceived through surrogacy and IVF, single father, that type of situation. And, that can be framed on one side to be like, look at this success story, look how wonderful everything turned out. And Allie just did such a really good job talking about that. I mean, maybe, have you been commenting on that as well? Because it does seem like there's like this battle for the narratives, because I think everybody was inspired watching her skate. She did such a beautiful job. And then you learn her story, and that can be framed as this real kind of, see, look, it works out great.
Yeah. Well, and it can work out in the sense of, thank God she wasn't abused. I mean,
Right.
probably because that actually was her biological father, and biology confers a level of protection that a contract does not. But I'll tell you, at Them Before Us, we have been cataloging the stories of children who have lost their mother or father, a lot of them through reproductive technologies, but really any child. I have found that it is hard for them to reflect on the real impact that mother or father loss has on them until they are 10 years out of the home. They have to no longer be financially dependent. They have to be like making their own families. Very often it's after they get married and have their own children that they go, oh my gosh, this is what I was missing. And I will say, it's hard to do that when you're still dependent, and especially because you love your parent.
Mm.
That's a struggle that a lot of kids with lesbian and gay parents have, is they truly love their parents, and yet they have this hole, this something that is missing, these questions that have gone unanswered. But they don't necessarily know any different. So I will be curious to see, when she gets married and has children, if she does, I hope she does, whether or not she goes, this is what it's like to have a mom. There's a guy who I've been in contact with for about 10 years who grew up with lesbian mothers, and always knew that there was something missing, but never felt like he could say anything he, because they are fragile women. And if he were to express a differing opinion, there would be a problem.
Right.
So anyway, he's like, it's no big deal. I figured it out. It's fine. I chose a very, very masculine profession because it's clear that I needed a lot more male energy in my life, and I'm trying to compensate for what I lost in childhood. And then he got married, and he had a baby a year ago. And he texts me and he's like, oh my God, I was robbed.
Mm.
I was robbed. I had no idea that you could love somebody like this. And the ways that I interact with my son, it's nothing like my wife. I'm so glad that he has his mother, but he needs me. He's like, I feel like I'm healing myself just by being a father to a boy. And so I think that I'm so glad Alisa was successful, and she's beautiful and she's wonderful and she's totally ours. Like, I'm absolutely like, you're our girl.
Yeah.
But someday she is going to have to reckon with the fact that she was made from a white egg because her father wanted to diversify her genetic stock. And she did have maternal influence. His mother came over because they needed help and she needed a mother. And I think his ex-wife, who was not suitable material to make a baby, I think was involved in her life for the first several years as well. And will she look back and say, but who do I belong to?
Yeah.
Where did I come from? My guess is she will ask that question, because every human does at some point.
Yeah. And it's going to take courage for people to speak out, because I can imagine just the existential angst that would bring into your soul when you're thinking, this is something I want to express, but I don't want to dishonor my parent who I love and who I'm grateful for in many cases. And, what would that look like even for the parents who maybe had gone through IVF and realized like, oh, I think that was actually immoral. But then what does that mean? Where I obviously am glad my child exists. And yes, and this is where I just love where good Christian theology comes in, because of course we recognize that these children are made in the image and likeness of God, and they have dignity, value, and worth. And I'm glad they exist. But at the same time, that can coexist at the same time with realizing like there's a deep moral issue going on that people really need to realize. And there is, I think, just like the trans issue, there's coming a reckoning when
Yes.
enough people kind of can feel empowered by each other to speak out and maybe be given words to help guide that. And that's where I'm so grateful for what you guys are doing. Let's talk about this last strategy you have here. And it says that we must transform the church into a child-centered fighting force. So can you talk about the role of the church in this campaign?
The church has gotten a lot of this wrong, unfortunately, because we fell into the trap that if we really love gay people, we must redefine marriage. And really, the importance is a witness so that we can be open to the gospel if they have questions. All of that is true, that we want to love our gay friends and we don't want to unnecessarily harm our witness. But your attitude and your disposition towards people that reject Christ or are yet not in the family or who live a different lifestyle, that is not necessarily your primary interface with the world. If you look at scripture and if you look at history, what you're going to see is this near uniform response, regardless of the country, regardless of the century, of Christians as it relates to threats against kids. You see women who stepped up to care for twins in Nigeria because they were killing twins, in the early 19th century, because in Nigeria, they believed that one of the two twins was possessed by a demon, but they couldn't figure out which one, so they'd kill them both. Mm-hmm. And she was like, Mary Slessor, I think. She said, I don't think so. That's not how we treat children. So she just took in all the twins. So she just had a home that was filled with twins. You have Christian missionaries in China who, when they arrived in the late 1800s, saw this barbaric practice of binding little girls' feet, in essence, cracking them in the middle, breaking them in half, and then wrapping them over and over and over for the next several years as the bones grew into misshaped chunks so that the girls could have lily feet that were 3 inches long on the bottom and then be more marriageable. And the Christian missionaries are like, I'm sorry, in a civilized world where God decides that children need protection, we don't mutilate their feet. And so what did the Christian missionaries do? They said, we're going to start some schools, and they're going to be great schools. And boys and girls can come to our schools. But unfortunately, only girls with natural feet are going to be able to attend. We won't be able to take your daughters if they have bound feet. And what it meant is the parents now had a choice. Like, I could bind my daughter's feet and she could be more marriageable, or she could be wicked smart and then climb the ladder and be marriageable because now she's got this incredible mind and she's able to step into all of these different roles that if you don't have an education, you can't fill. And they were actually the beginning of eradicating foot binding in China. That was the impact that the Christian missionaries had. And you look at all around the world, there has been infanticide and abortion. Christians have always stood against that. In Victorian England, when the Industrial Revolution was at its height, it was a time where people would select street boys and girls and put them in factories for 14 hours a day because they didn't have parents to take care of them and nobody to protect them. And it was Christians that said, you cannot do this to children, even if they're unwanted, even if they're poor, even if they're homeless. We need to have child labor laws so that you can't exploit them. So it's like the threat against children has changed in different countries, in different centuries. The Christian response has never changed. It is always, we protect children, even if we piss off the adults who are harming the children. We have chosen child protection over social acceptance. It is part of our pure and undefiled religion before God to protect children. So we're going to create a curriculum. I've got incredible Protestants like Albert Mohler and John Stonestreet and Sean McDowell helping to develop that material. And we've got incredible Catholics who are working to inform that project, where we are going to talk not just about God's definition of the marriage as defined by the created order or by the Catholic Church, but we're also going to talk about these 3 different characteristics of marriage that Jesus defined in Mark chapter 10, where he said, a man shall leave his mother and father, be joined to his wife, the two will become one flesh. What God has joined together, let no man separate. So what was the criteria he just outlined for marriage? It needs to be complementary, male and female. It needs to be one flesh, monogamous, and it needs to be permanent, till death do us part. Those 3 criteria each have critical benefits as it relates to children. And that complementarity is the one that was rejected during gay marriage. The permanence was rejected during no-fault divorce. And I've got an article up soon about the polygamous movement that is working to remove monogamy as well. All different iterations of marriage redefinition victimizes children. So we're going to communicate that to Christians through incredible leaders who are going to do a few short videos for us. And then we're going to shepherd people through, how do you thread that needle of child defense while not unnecessarily putting stumbling blocks in the path of your friends who identify as gay and lesbian? How can you do both well? And then tell Christians, this is your opportunity to step into the great cloud of witnesses. All of you love and revere Amy Carmichael. I mean, be an Amy Carmichael. And there's very few areas other than marriage and family and issues of new life where children are being victimized on a greater scale. So it's really time for the church to find its spine and start speaking up on behalf of kids.
When will the curriculum be coming out? Will this be like a Bible study people could do in their small group, or what will that look like?
Yeah, we hope so. Hopefully by June. And it's going to be a series of YouTube videos so people can watch them in kind of little compartments. But then we will also create material that threads it all together if you want to do it as a small group or a Sunday school.
Awesome. Okay, and then how can people get involved? Give us like the website or just little things they can be doing if they're, somebody just maybe it's a pastor, maybe it's just somebody that is a businessman or a housewife that's listening to this going, "Gosh, I want to use my voice. I want to get involved." What can they do?
I want all of you. I want you businessmen. I want you housewives. I want all of you. And that literally is it. Like it has to be all of us making the case for children, understanding that this is critical as it relates to child protection and really all of society as well. I mean, the roots of this go so, so deep. One thing we didn't talk a whole lot about was, this whole thing of this was a massive power grab by the state. We used to recognize the relationship between parent and child as a pre-political right, something that the government did not assign, they recognized. But now gay marriage has taken it into a new realm where the state is now assigning unrelated adults as parents of a child.
Mm.
And when the state has the power to determine that an unrelated adult is the parent of a child, they have the power to determine that you are not the parents of your own children. I mean, like it is
Wow.
actually a threat to every parent and every child. I mean, like that, what you said, like the answer to how does my gay marriage affect anyone else? The answer is in the worst way possible. You have weakened my claim to my own children because you have insisted that children don't have a claim to their own parents. So this is something all of us need to understand. We need to be experts in. Go to greaterthancampaign.com. I made a little gay marriage quiz. You can take the gay marriage quiz and find out how much you really know about gay marriage. You definitely should sign up for our updates. We will not spam you. We'll just send something every now and then updating you on the campaign. If you want to become a force for children, you can go to thembeforeus.com and subscribe to our Substack. We put something out twice a week, really with the specific purpose of equipping you on how to engage the world, how to train up your children in all different areas as it relates to answering, especially the cultural objections to God's design for the family. All of the answers that you are asked, all the questions you're asked that you're not exactly sure how to answer. We want to make this easy for you. We need your voice. We want you to know more about this than anyone else because children need a robust defense. And it is going to be you and me and hopefully an army of really influential Christians and conservatives too.
Love it. So, is there anything that we didn't get to that you want to make sure you get to say before we close out here?
Wow, that's quite an open invitation.
Open.
I would
Go
just
for
say
it.
that if you're a Christian, this is the time to be courageous. And the world needs it. Children need it. But also, it satisfies something. I think that one of the biggest problems that we have had in the whole conversation about marriage and family is in the name of love, we have gone silent. And our silence has led to child victimization on a variety of different issues. But the reality is that the world is desperate for genuine answers to all of the different questions. I don't know if you've noticed, but the biggest culture war issues happening out there today are not necessarily on taxes or foreign policy, though there is some of that. The biggest culture war issues today have everything to do with human relationships, how we make life, whether we take life, how we do marriage, parenting, friendships, dating, eugenics, everything that has to do with the things that can get you uninvited from Thanksgiving dinner ultimately come down to one question. And it is the question, what does it mean to be human?
Mm.
And Christians, you are the only people with the right answer to that question. Like the evolutionary biologists, they don't know the answer. The secular humanists, they don't know the answers. The Islamists, you don't want their answer. The only way that you can create a society where the vulnerable are protected and all of the nation thrives is if you answer the question, what does it mean to be human from a biblical perspective, from an Imago Dei perspective? You Christians have something that the world desperately needs. Even if you're not preaching the gospel, you're going to advance human thriving. And when you advance those good arguments, somebody may ask you for a reason for the hope that is in you. It is really important that we understand. I think that my husband went to seminary in the early 2000s. And even then, the big push was apologetics. How do you
Hmm.
defend the Bible? And that's really important. Like all of us understand, it's really important to be able to understand the triunity of God, and that it's not a modalist faith, and it's not a Gnostic understanding of God. It is a triunity. All of that's really important. Those are not the questions that culture is asking right now.
Right. That's
The
so true.
questions culture is asking is it okay if I make this baby in a laboratory? And why can't I marry my same sex
Yes.
partner?
Yeah.
Okay, so Christians, you need to be ready to give an answer to the questions that culture is asking. Some of that is going to come down to defending the canon of scripture. But right now, the most urgent question is not the question of what is the nature of God. It is what is the nature of man. So that is what we need to dive into. That is the front line of the
Hmm.
war. It's a culture war, but as Ali Stuckey says, culture is important because culture is people. And
Hmm.
we are called to steward and care for people. So you've got to get the answers exactly right as it relates to these questions around what does it mean to be human. You, me, understanding the Imago Dei are the only ones that have those answers. Go into culture with great content, and you'll probably find yourself evangelizing them on the other side of the answer.
Man, and you know what just absolutely breaks my heart is that we have see, now I'm fired up. We have so many Christians who are literally like, "Katy, Alisa, Allie, can you guys just shut up about culture and just talk about the canon of scripture and the Trinity and just the things that, just those kinds of things? Because you're just doing a social gospel. You're just bringing in all this culture war stuff. And just get back to just the theological and that like just, just gets me because I'm like, this is literally what is happening, the great evil that's happening. And you just want us to shut up about that because somehow you've been convinced that we shouldn't do a culture war. It blows my mind. You're exactly right. Yes, we need to be trained on how to explain how we got the Bible and how we can defend the reliability of its transmission and good theology, all of that. Always. But all of that has an application in culture, right? It has an application to the little Chinese girls whose feet are being broken. It has an application to the millions and millions of voiceless children who can't speak for themselves, but we can. So I am just so happy that you exist and that you've
One
got a
more
fire
story.
in your bones.
Can I
Yes,
do one
please.
more story? Because
Yeah.
about what you're saying, my kids have largely been at Seattle Public Schools, and I get a lot of flack for that. But nobody in those public schools were saying, "What can I do to be saved?"
Mm.
They were all saying, they were all saying, "Why won't you use my pronouns?"
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
my children needed an answer to that, an answer that was
Yes.
grounded in Scripture, but then evidenced by the world that God has made and the sociological harms that go from confusing and blurring the line between male and female. And you know what's interesting? Some of those people ended up at my church. Some of them had a Muslim background, and we've been able to watch them get baptized because that was the entry point. Another quick story. There was an incredible book written a couple years ago called The Case Against the Sexual Revolution by Louise Perry. And it was a critique that sexual liberation came at the cost of specifically women and children, that the sexual revolution was bad for women. And she was writing it as a feminist. And all throughout the book, she was saying things like, if you just looked at the effect that sexual morality had on women, you would have to come really close to saying that biblical morality is really the best way to create relationships, especially sexual relationships between men and women, and then, connecting them to their children. So everybody said, well, Louise, are you a Christian? And she goes, no, I'm not. I just recognize the goodness of this design. And I think it's interesting that that old, outdated book seemed to get it exactly right.
Mm.
Well, Louise Perry became a Christian last fall. And I heard her say on a podcast, it makes sense that if something is sociologically true, that it would probably spiritually be true as well. And so what was evidenced by the world that God has made actually pushed her upstream to look at the God who made it. This whole like get out of the culture war, What are you even talking about? This is the pathway of evangelism that God has set out on a silver
Yes.
platter. You're refusing to do it because it's hard. It
Mm.
actually takes a little bit of expertise beyond just quoting verse and chapter. So just, I would say, be
And
honest
it
about what
makes you a target. It makes your
yeah,
it makes people hate
the
you.
cost is high. It was not that hard for my kids to go to their public school and say, I believe that Jesus is the only son of God. They'd be like, cool, you do you. But
Yeah.
if they said, I don't agree with gay marriage and abortion is murder, you got to watch your six.
Yeah.
Okay. So it is much more socially costly to engage on the what does it mean to be human questions as relates to what is happening out in culture. Like, it's very safe to just say, I'm going to just answer questions about what is the nature of God and what is the nature of salvation. Okay,
Mhm.
those are important questions. But just be honest. You're actually choosing social acceptance over the real work of protecting the vulnerable.
So good. So, so good. I want to thank my guest, Katy Faust. I want you guys to pick up all of her books. Them Before Us is a phenomenal book. In fact, we have an interview with Katy back in our archives that you can listen to about that book. Go to greaterthancampaign.com, get involved, pray about what you can do, and maybe, let your pastor know about this stuff. If maybe he's not aware of it, you can let him know what's going on. So important. And let's remember, as we pursue Christ, let's keep a sharp mind, a soft heart, and a thick skin. We'll see you next time.
So